want it louder?
Sorry, yep, I was just pressing record. Yeah, we can get started. Did you want to
We
do?
weren't recording all that?
That was a pregame show. Would have been. I was like, hey, Carla, I'm just going to hand it off. I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. If you're joining us from Mi'kma'ki and from Central Territories, and good morning for those that are joining from the West Coast. Welcome to our curatorial panel, The Age of Decolonizing, Curating in the Age of Decolonization. And this is a panel, a part of the broader workshop, a two-day workshop that the memory activism research team coming out of NSCAD and King's Universities here in the Atlantic have been activating around the notion of cultural spaces as living monuments, critical museology, and decolonizing the museum. So thank you all for being here with us today. Before I start, I just wanted to ground us based on the fact that this workshop is being hosted by us folks out in the Atlantic to situate us within the context of Mi'kmaq territory and to acknowledge not only the Mi'kmaq Nation and in Mi'kma'ki, but also the treaty relationships that are embedded here that are grounded in the land and also in our practices as treaty people. Within the confines and the regulations and principles of the treaties of peace and friendship first signed in the 1700s, 1725, that really thought through principles of reciprocity, responsibilities, and respect. And so I'd like to kind of start there to think about how, as decolonizing practices, how could that be a shared responsibility? Today we have the generous contributions of three incredible Indigenous thinkers. Thank you so much for being with us. And for those non-Indigenous folks and white settler folks, a part of this audience, thinking about the roles and responsibilities of non-Indigenous folks in these. So can we kind of bring that in later on in the conversation? Some of the key concepts that we're kind of thinking through today, obviously the living monument of museums, but also the concepts of radical curating or notions of accessibility, but mainly also the concepts of Indigenous sovereignties brought forward within context of institutional critique. And we'll think through artistic resurgences, obviously, within that. So the way it's going to work, I'm not going to talk that much. Obviously, I'm chatting a lot right now. But we're going to introduce our three panelists, wonderful speakers, and then have a presentation from Aiden Gillis, our first presenter, and then we'll move into a conversation with Dr. Julie Nagam and Dr. Julie Igloliorte, or Dr. Heather Igloliorte. Sorry, bud. Heather doing it. And then we'll have a conversation amongst ourselves and then bring in your questions from the audience. You can either type your questions into the chat or the Q&A. And then if you would like to bring that forward, we'll unmute you and you can share your question. Or if you prefer, we can just read the question and respond to it. It might be that we might just start engaging with your questions while we're in conversation with each other, or we might have a little pause and go directly to your questions in that way. I'll just see how it works in terms of how our conversations move forward. So I'm going to introduce our first panelists. I just want to say thank you so much, Aiden Gillis, for joining us today and sharing your Sunday afternoon with us. Aiden Gillis is a Mi'kmaq curator and artist and is the Indigenous Arts Programmer at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. Aiden graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts with a focus in painting and a minor in art history from NSCAD University in 2017, and recently curated Worn Inward at the AGNS in 2019. Aiden is also board of directors member at the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center. So thank you so much, Aiden. I will then introduce our two other folks, just because then we'll have an idea of what's coming next. Dr. Julie Nagam is a Métis German Syrian scholar, curator, and artist, and is the Canadian Research Chair in Indigenous Arts Collaboration and Digital Media, and an associate professor in the Department of Art History at the University of Winnipeg. She is the inaugural artistic director for 2020-2021 for Nuit Blanche, Toronto, and her SHIRK research includes digital makerspaces and incubators, mentorship, digital media and design, and international collaborations in place-based knowledges. She's a Glam Collective member, which we'll talk about what that is a little bit later, and the co-chair of the Indigenous Advisory Circle at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. So welcome, Julie. Thank you for being with us as well. Our third and wonderful speaker is Dr. Heather Igloliorte. I can't believe I just called you Julie. We'll talk about that later. Who is an Inuk from Nunatsiavut, who holds the Tier 1 University Research Chair in Circumpolar Indigenous Arts and is an associate professor in the Department of Art History at Concordia University in Montreal, Quebec. Heather also directs the SSHRC Partnership Grant Inuit Futures in Arts Leadership, which is a SSHRC grant running from 2018 to 2025. She's also a Glam Collective member and is the co-chair of the Indigenous Advisory Circle at the Winnipeg Art Gallery as it works towards opening the new Inuit Art Center, Haumayok. Is it okay? Okay, we'll talk about that as well, coming in 2021. So thank you so much, and we'll open it up to Aiden.
All right, thanks so much for having me. As you mentioned, I'm Aiden Gillis, the Indigenous Arts Programmer at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia since December 2017. The work I do primarily includes creating and hosting education programs, events, occasionally teachings and leading themed tours, as well as exhibition curatorial work. I am a little bit more on the shyer side, but you know, we do our best, right? So I'm going to share my screen because I like to include some photos when I'm talking if possible.
I get that.
All right.
So glad you're showing pictures.
Just a few. All right. Everybody can see that good?
Yeah.
All right. So there's kind of like the little, oh my goodness. Okay. This better not do that the whole time. Okay. So, yeah, so today in considering what I could contribute to this conversation, I decided to speak about an exhibition that I curated in 2019 that is ongoing right now. It's at the Grenfell Art Gallery in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, and then it moves over to St. John's, Newfoundland at MUN, which it'll be up for from January 15 until March 20th. And so let me see here. If I have time, I would also like to touch on an exhibition that I'm co-curating with a colleague of mine, Michael McCormick, who's the assistant curator. And but I don't know if I'll have time for that, but I'll loop it into the conversation later if that's the case.
We can make time, Aiden.
There you go. So yeah, this exhibition, Worn Inward, that's currently up at the Grenfell Art Gallery, has a lot of layers to it when it comes to the process and inspiration. I even start, like, when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, where do I even start with this? But yeah, so let me see. So it was developed through the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia's education department and curated by myself. And the founding structure of this curatorial project started with outreach, like finding the artists, workshops, like meeting with the artists, having different conversations, bringing in mentors. And then it was from those conversations that the artists created the work that would then go into the exhibition. And then beyond that, there was a lot of opportunities for the artists to maybe even just design programs, lead workshops, have talks. And this opportunity was really focused on emerging artists. But it was inspired by Jordan Bennett's Gidua Midajic at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia in 2019. And it's a site-specific installation exhibition at the gallery that celebrates the artistic innovation of the Mi'kmaq Nation, community knowledge, worldview, and identity. You'll see in these photos that Bennett honored historical core work pieces by expanding their designs, iconography, and stories through paint on wood panel, as well as the gallery walls. So yeah, many folks often have these biases about how they think Indigenous arts are supposed to look due to what they have been taught about us, which more often than not is a misrepresentation. When it comes to Indigenous arts, in reality, it's more about who made the art and the stories told than it is about the chosen mediums. So when we were drawing inspiration for Worn Inward, we were thinking about what it is that we wanted to say in regard to a broader conversation of Indigenous self-representation, how we represent ourselves and celebrate that in a positive light. And when we think of decolonial practice, you know, it's really essential to center Indigenous voices and perspectives when it comes to our presence, whether that's through, you know, like our artwork, our bodies. And notice how I speak, like when I'm speaking about the different elements, you know, of indigeneity, I'll often add an S to the words that I'm saying when I'm speaking more broadly. And I think that's an important distinction I want to make now, because that avoids placing so many nations and cultures into one big lump, you know, which couldn't be further from accurate. So yeah, like in the media, whether it's through film, literature, or the news, hasn't had a great history or track record when it comes to the representation of Indigenous folks, not to mention school curriculums. You know, the way that people see their own cultures and communities reflected and represented has an impact on how people see themselves too. Oftentimes, you know, Indigenous folks are depicted through stereotypes and images of us in the past rather than who we are now and the good work we're doing and where we see ourselves going. And so the 8 emerging Indigenous artists who took part in this project, you know, they're originally from communities across the continent within what is now called Canada, between the ages of 19 and 30, that were living in Halifax during the time. Some of them has since spread their wings a bit. As I touched on earlier, these artists participated in group discussions and workshops while exploring themes of self-representation through adornment and wearable design before creating the artwork included in the show. And the artists' names are Kilia Atencio, Brandy Bernard, Darcy Bernhardt, Brandon Hoax, Gezik Isaac, Flora May, Natasha Root, and Ariel Twist. So also Mi'kmaq artist Jordan Bennett and Roger Lewis, who is the curator of ethnology at the Museum of Natural History, also offered their mentorship from their own expertise and experience within the arts and museums fields. The artists got one-on-one time with them as well. And, you know, you'll see here, I'll go back, Jordan's there talking with the artist in his own exhibition. And that's one of the, probably about our second workshop, you know, like first we met each other, we regrouped, and then we came back and we had like a cool hangout with Jordan, and he came back a couple more times to hang out with us as well. And yeah, so Roger Lewis, he took us into the kind of like the archives of the Museum of Natural History, which has the most incredible collection of Mi'kmaq visual and material culture, especially things that are more in the older range. So we saw things like, you know, quill work, we saw bead work, we saw so much basketry. You know, we even saw like, if you saw that picture before, I'm going to go back, of Jordan Bennett's work, like those are quill work chair seat covers. And so we actually saw the full chair with the quill work attached to it, like the physical chairs, and like what they looked like in different times that they were made, you know, back when different chemical dyes and everything were introduced to our territory through trade. And it's really amazing to see. So that also explains like the color choice, the very punchy like decisions that were made within Jordan's work as well. And on another note too, like due to the artists' different experience levels and skill sets, you know, they were really engaged in mentoring each other as well. Like some of them were, oh, there's Flora teaching Gezik the best way to go about embroidering eel leather, which Gezik had prepared themselves. But yeah, let me see here. What's next? Oh yes, here's another one of Roger and us in the archive. So people actually got to like physically touch the different things as well. And those ones there are from the 1800s. Like Mi'kmaq aren't easy. Look at all that. That's a little tiny beadwork there. But yeah, so let me see. So then we step a little bit more into this theme of, you know, Indigenous self-representation. And as I imagine most of you are probably museum and gallery goers, many times we've seen like pictures like Indigenous arts and material cultures with the tag artists unknown. And this is a really loaded statement in that, statement of anonymity. You know what I mean? Like, it speaks to the history of archivists not bothering to record the names of the makers, as well as stolen community pieces, but also speaks to the history of Indigenous material culture not being considered art that's kind of fit for gallery settings historically as well, due to having been considered craft. For museums and galleries moving forward, this is this history, this very particular history, is very important to directly address and to be acknowledged. And it was also a theme that was really brought into Jordan's work as well. Sorry, my lungs are a little bit funny today. Yeah, so he did a lot of research alongside Roger Lewis to identify possible families even that have created certain quillwork pieces included within his exhibition. And so he was actually even able to trace the family of Melissa Peter Paul, who is a quillwork artist within PEI. So yeah, so keeping this kind of themes in mind, I wanted the artist's identity and voices to really be emphasized in this exhibition. So for each work, the extended label included the chosen name of the artist, a 50 to 75 word statement that each person wrote about their own work and their nation's identity and their preferred spelling. Like, for example, here with Kilia Atencio. So this is actually a screenshot from the exhibition guide, but I wanted to put it as a visual on the screen. But let me see here. Yeah, so everybody wrote their own 50 to 75 word blurb about their own work, from their own point of view and their own voice. And when it comes to like the nation too, like, for Kilia Atencio is from Listaguj First Nation. Her work, her community spells Mi'kmaq with a G, whereas in Nova Scotia we spell Mi'kmaq with a K. And so there's all that regional dialect that happens as well. And so the exhibition guide, which is what I have here on the screen, and I don't know, I think you can see a tiny little version of me in the corner. I don't know if you guys can see me right now, but this is like what the exhibition guide, physically, like what it looks like. And I smoothly opened it to the same page on the screen. It's Kilia's page. And yeah, so that also includes like a photo of the artist's headshot, as well as their artist bio, a photo of the work that's in the exhibition, the typical didactic information about the medium, as well as their artist statement that was also on the wall. And this is actually available on the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia's official website. On the exhibitions page. And yeah, I can put that link in the chat afterwards. So let me see, what's my time here right now? It's 2:27. What do you guys think? Do we want to move on?
Do you want to? We have more time if you wanted, Aiden.
Okay.
Yeah, we're loving listening to you. So if you'd like to keep sharing, but if you'd like to move on and we can talk more about things after, that's fine too. Whatever is best for you.
Okay, cool. Let me see here. I know I do have some. Oh, I'll just mention this one really quick.
Keep showing that. That looks great.
Yeah, and then I'm going to touch like just for like a hot minute about the other exhibition that I'm curating.
Fantastic. We want to know about it. We want to know about it.
Oh my gosh. So here we go. So this piece here looks very peculiar. It's floating from the ceiling, and it actually rotates kind of like in a 360-degree circle. And this is the one that we call the collaboration piece. And basically any of the artists who were part of the exhibition were invited to kind of like come together and put a piece of themselves onto the jacket. And so whether that is one of the mentors, the curator, which was me or any of the other artists. And so the things that people chose to include, Jordan for Gadua Midajic had a line of enamel pins, and also in the gallery shop included some of the scarves that he made for a fundraiser for the St. John's Native Friendship Center a couple years back. And aside from that, we have Gezik Isaac. You guys can't see my mouse, eh? Can you? You can. Oh,
We
I didn't
can,
know
yeah,
that. Okay,
awesome.
cool. Oh, so here you can see this this salmon pouch with wampum beads hanging from the bottom. Now, I wish I had a close-up shot. That was made by Gezik Isaac, and it's full of white sage. And that piece was pretty special, actually. That was when me and Gezik got together, and I taught them how to make kind of like my pouch style, and that's what they wanted to include in the jacket. And then on the other side, you see some applique and some embroidery, and the applique there with almost like the big area on the back is taken directly from a Mi'kmaq quill basket design that Kilia Atencio had met at the archives. And I don't think you can really see Flora May's, but, oh yes, you can. Okay, so right there on the right sleeve, on the photo on the right, you'll see almost like a bit of fauna peeking up over the, on the elbow there. And Flora's expertise and kind of like practice is really grounded in land-based, plant-based imagery. And on the top, I did that piece of embroidery that has a Mi'kmaq hieroglyph and kind of like that rising sun. And it means that we've earned it. So I'll let people interpret that as they will. And then I just chose to include some close-ups of some of the actual work. Like, I think I kind of struggled to fit talking about this into 10 minutes, and I overthought it a little bit. But when it comes to this exhibition, I usually talk a lot about the material culture of it all, and especially thinking back to the conversation about what's considered fine arts. Like, what do you put on a wall in a museum? And this is Kilia Atencio's red carpet look here. I honestly, I'm just so tempted to try and buy it off of her, to be honest. Yeah, I'm absolutely in love with it. And this is Brandon Hoax's harness. Brandon is actually doing a series of work branching off of this project, in which they decided to display the harness on top of the frame rather than trying to confine it within a frame. And so that idea of, worn inward, this is more like worn outward. Like to kind of also give you a sneak peek of the kind of things that the artists were writing about their work, I'll read you a little story from the exhibition guide. And what Brandon wrote was, through the eroticism of the self and their own body, the fetishizing of Western methods of display and object/artifact, Hoax introduce is a critique of the Western art institution and acknowledges the settler state's fascination with Indigenous craft and art. They explore ideas of sex and ceremony, voyeurism and survival, self-sexualization and self-expression, self-preservation and self-perversion. Sorry. Let me see. I think I had one more piece of artwork on here. That would be Flora May. So the one I was talking about, the fauna. This one is called, is it Sprouting Grass Moon? That's what I think this one's called. And it is in, Sprouting Grass Moon. And it's has Labrador tea in the middle, and it has bear berries and like the moon cycles and the stars. And it talks about, like a certain time of year and what you can find. And this is a quilted piece as well. So it seems like, if you were to walk through the space, you would really notice that everybody kind of chose their own medium. Like there was paintings, embroidery, there was sewing, there was jewelry, there were, silk painting, all kinds of different things. And Jordan Bennett also included a piece of his own artwork in there as well. But yeah, I think that's where I'll leave it for this exhibition. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Did you want to share a few words about the exhibition you're working on right now, or do you want to wait and do that later?
I'm wondering if that's better for later, actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Thank you so much, Aiden. I'm so glad we had an opportunity to really see and hear about the process. And we can talk, I'm sure people in the audience have questions, so we'll come back and chat more with you in a few minutes after Dr. Julie Nagam and Dr. Heather Igloliorte share a few things with us. So thank you again, Aiden.
Thanks.
I wonder what would happen if we got married. Like, how would the name switch? You know, like
do a blended name.
Yeah, do a blended name. Exactly. It's kind of fun. You know,
Igloo Nagam.
Well, to me, usually when I'm chatting with you, it's with the two of you. So I guess it makes sense now.
And we're gonna roll with it. I'm okay. I can be Julie Igloliorte or her
Jether.
Yeah, Jether Nagam.
That was a fantastic talk, Aiden. I'd seen the posters, or like I'd seen images from the show, but I hadn't gotten the behind the scenes of the process. So amazing to get to see that work. Congratulations on your excellent show. Like,
yeah, and I love the conversation. Like, just so smart, so intuitive. It's so interesting to see. And Jordan's the perfect kind of artist to do that with too, because he's so generous and has the ability to really connect with other artists and talk about the work that way. And you can see that it was strong because the work coming out of it was also really strong.
maybe I'll get to come back to the Atlantic provinces at some point and see it.
Yes.
You got till March 20.
So no.
Yeah, right. And hopefully when you are back, you'll be able to meet the incredible Roger Lewis, who also has that like unbelievable generosity. When you visit with him and with the baskets and quill work and other ancestral beings at the Natural History Museum, which it was a very different experience for me at a Natural History Museum, where normally, from my experience, it's literally hands off, and his approach has been to really bring forward Mi'kmaq ways of being in that space. And so I think having Jordan and Roger together, that's an incredible team of mentors for artists, or for anybody, to be honest. I think in terms of curators as well, what a great experience to have as well. So
I don't know if it's a brag or what it is, but I will say in 2000, I don't know if Jordan talks about this, but in 2011, I was a research fellow at the Canadian Museum of Civilization, which is now the Museum of History. And he was coming to the city, and so I asked if I could get him a tour with Dr. Stephen Augustine, who was then a curator there. And it was on that amazing tour of the Mi'kmaq collections that are held in the National Museum that Jordan first came in contact with the quillwork seat benches, and got inspired, because instead of them being in like natural browns and tans and stuff, they were like neon pink and bright purple, and so that was kind of the moment that he was just like, well, what are we doing? And it was a couple of years later before he started working on that, but that was the first time that he encountered that and realized that his ancestors were working with whatever bright colors and technologies were available to him, instead of sort of being stuck in that past. And I think it speaks a lot to what you were saying in your presentation, Aiden, around challenging ideas about Indigenous peoples as being sort of antiquated or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting.
It's also a beautiful example of how to engage with collections. Like, I think that it's such a tough way to kind of, we've seen, especially with archives and museum collections, we've seen a lot of kind of responsive, or like in frustration, or talking about them being living objects, and then artists creating the work out of that. And so it's such a different context to see what actually grew out of it, because the way that you were able to engage with the collection, and the fact that there's a relationship there with the Indigenous community, it's so important, right? So it shifts what the content ends up coming out of, right?
It's also, I think it's really critical what you were talking about, what ends up in the archive and how is that provenance documented. We know exactly which settlers passed it down through, but then we don't know who the name of the artist is, which you would think would be the most important thing very often. And I think that those brightly colored quillwork pieces, like the fact that they are even in collections instead of the ones made with natural material, like natural colors, is, I think, also very interesting, because we know that the collector's impulse was to go towards something that like spoke to a previous time, some sort of authentic Indigenous person in the past. And so that when you even see those things end up in collections, you think, how many other things were actually didn't end up in national collections because they were a little bit unusual, or they referenced modernity, or they had, you know, some sort of contemporary element that kept them out. So when you do see those things that have like lanolin, bright dyes and so on, like even that is, it really does put the whole rest of the collection into question.
Yeah, so I guess with that, I guess we'll talk a little bit. I should say that we're
talk about artwork too.
Yeah. You know, we're streaming live from Treaty 1 territory in the homeland, heartland of the Métis Nation. So just to like, you know, put that into context, of course, and we're happy to adopt our East Coast / North Coast, you know, center of Quebec. So it's just like, so, you know, we're happy to have her here. And so, yeah, I just think that some of the work, we're going to start with the Winnipeg Art Gallery and talk a little bit about probably one of the most exciting projects that we've got to do in the last 5 years or 6 years, I guess, for me, and even longer for you, for the first consultation with the Inuit Arts Center. And so we got to, one of the highlights was organizing, even though neither of us are language speakers, we got to bring together a huge group of language speakers and rename 14 spaces. So we renamed the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and we're going to show you guys how some of those names sound and bits and pieces. And we were able to bring together 7 different Indigenous languages across the province of Manitoba, and then the 4
plus dialects from Nubialawit and Inuit regions across Inuit and Nagam. So yeah, I know it was in our bios, but just for a little bit of context, Julie and I have been co-chairs of the Indigenous Advisory Circle at the Winnipeg Art Gallery since it formed in 2017.
Yeah.
There was, of course, a different Indigenous circle that was organized by curator of contemporary and Indigenous art, Jamie Isaac, and that our circle sort of grew from that. Julie and I, as not employees of the WAG, but as professors and independent curators, artists, and et cetera, like we are sort of arm's length from the Winnipeg Art Gallery. So we felt like that was a really critical part of our being a part of this new Indigenous Advisory Circle, which was that we had I think a little bit of the freedom to say what we want to say, because the director is not our boss. And so, when we're talking about like decolonizing institutions, like there are power dynamics at play, not just between Indigenous and non-Native peoples, but also between employers and employees. And so I think that that's one strategy that has been really effective, is that we feel like we have the freedom to speak freely. And it doesn't matter how great your dynamic is with your employer or your senior staff, like those things are still very real relationships. And so that was one of the critical things that we put into place when we were forming the circle.
And we were right to have the opportunity. And sometimes, you know, the fact that when a museum's all of a sudden going to decolonize, you know, it's because there's external pressures, right? And so because we were building, we have the world's largest Inuit art collection. We're building an Inuit Art Center. You know, we could really push the institution to want to have a formalized Indigenous Advisory Circle because there was a need for it. So partly the conversation, you know, Jamie had an incredible group of people to draw on for the work that she was doing. And I think that that's really important. But I think the ability for us to be able to put pressure as an institution onto the Winnipeg Art Gallery was right, because they were kind of stuck in a place where they need that too, right? And I think that one of the most incredible parts about the circle is that, you know, we were brought in early. So there were, you know, Jamie had a permanent position at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. I was a research chair that was jointly appointed with the Winnipeg Art Gallery and the University of Winnipeg. And we were ripe to kind of do that work. And I think that, you know, bringing in, making sure we had representation from across Manitoba, national members, and making sure we had all of the representation from Inuit Nunanga. Did I say it right?
You did.
I'm learning. And so then, so then I think that it really put us in such an important position to be able to be in those conversations early. So, you know, Heather and I were really involved with getting to look at all like working with the architect and thinking about how the space would be and talking about commission works and then, you know, how is it integrated within the Winnipeg Art Gallery? Because for me, the biggest thing was, you know, you are situated in Treaty 1 territory in the homeland of Métis Nation, and Inuit, we have 7 Indigenous folks across the province, and Inuit make up the smallest group for us, right? And so we knew that there would be tensions existing in that. And we, you know, which is important to kind of tease out and talk about. And for me, the center and the gallery were always integrated. Like I never saw them as separate entities. And I think that it's really important to kind of think that that's the spot that we kind of worked from. And then we had all these great people to, you know, think about how would we welcome Inuit into our territory? How would we think about that relationship? Why is it important, you know, will there be First Nations and Métis content within that institution as well? And I think that we've seen a really strong commitment, not only with the first hire for an assistant curator in Inuit art, and that's incredible. And the fact that, you know, you want to talk a little bit about Inuit?
Yeah. So I think like what we're talking about here is that the circle, we had these really generative conversations that went, that were like, what do we see for a curatorial vision for the museum? But then also like, who are the staff people that are working there? Who's the security? Who's in the management level? And so they also hired a director of strategic initiatives or
Indigenous initiatives.
And those were all recommendations that came out of these lovely conversations we had with the circle around all of these things. But one of the big ones was, what does the welcome look like? Because in many major cities across Canada, not just Winnipeg, but lots of places, you have multiple Indigenous peoples and you're always on someone else's land or you're on someone's land. Yeah. And so like, how do we make space to celebrate many Indigenous cultures in singular spaces? And I think that was what the Manitoba's Indigenous peoples, the Métis and First Nations here, really underscored through those conversations, was wanting Inuit to feel welcome and to feel like it was a space for them as well in the Inuit Art Center. So we could talk about the naming, or I can go into Inuit.
Oh yeah, we should show a little bit of
let's show you a little bit.
So we're going to show you a little bit.
So the circle meets, go ahead and share the screen. So the circle meets once a year in person. Of course, we did not meet in person this year, unfortunately, but every year we get together, we gather, we have other conversations online, of course, but we have these 3-day kind of events where we get together and get to talk through big ideas for what a museum should be and could be in the future. And at the most recent one, we focused on naming. And so as Julie was saying, renaming spaces in the existing WAG building, and then naming spaces in the new building, which formerly called the Inuit Art Center and now is Kamayok. So
should I play one of the things? Because I think, because it's cool.
Kamayok. Kamayok.
You can see on the screen that it says what dialect it's from. So it's Inuktitut, but it's from Nunavik rather than Nunavut or Nunatsiavut or the Inuvialuit region. And then we also have a name for the existing building.
Bindigan Bewasea.
And it was really important that we do, so those are the 2 building names. And then we have, as you can see here, Ilavut, Kilak, Katita, Kijik, Iliptik, all the way down with all the different names. And you can also hear them said by the people who were part of the naming process that we underwent over a series of months of these really beautiful conversations.
So you can do.
Yeah.
Nishwazo.
And it was really critical. Oh, sorry. talking over an elder.
Yeah, sorry.
But it was really critical that we had the oral component of this right away for people, because what we really, really wanted to underscore, what the circle really cared about, was that these names become the names for the spaces. So you stop saying the mezzanine or the second floor gallery or, you know, white donor's name gallery. And instead you're saying, oh, I'm installing in Kilak today. I'll be upstairs at Kilak. You know, so like just to make everyone at the WAG absorb it and let it become
work hard,
normal, like learn the pronunciations and say them properly, and to really think about that as an act of decolonization. It was it's a gesture, you know, like, but it is a concrete move towards understanding, respecting Indigenous languages and appreciating how Indigenous language brings conceptual ways of thinking through the museum into practice because instead of thinking like, oh, this is the mezzanine gallery, we're like, well, it's actually, it's Kijik, and that means the sky. And so when we are in this space, like what does many of the names have to do with the light, the quality of light, brightness, the return of the sun. And so like, how do those words relate to Indigenous seasons, understanding other kinds of ways of understanding, which kind of, it doesn't do the work, but it opens a door to a new way of thinking through an institution, I think.
And one of the fun things was that, we had so many language speakers of so many different regions. And I think that what was really beautiful was once we kind of started to shape around this idea of that, we have always been a light, and the fact that we've never burned out. Sometimes we get dull and terrible things happen, and then but we still flicker, and then all of a sudden, it's kind of the dawn, it's like the new light. And so thinking about how that relationship happens. And so we, same with the space that Heather was just talking about, the big kind of sky level. So we use the word and that kind of translates in Cree, Anishinaabe, Michif, as all the same word. And so we were able to think about the concept of sky, and then those names start to take shape of those buildings, right? So, or spaces in the building. And so I think that it's really important to kind of think about why that conversation could happen. And partly that was because, we envisioned, even as non-speakers, we thought it was really important that all of the Inuit speakers were able to talk with the Michif speakers and the Anishinaabe speakers and the Cree speakers, so that we could have a really fruitful dialogue to be able to see, people were like, oh, we like that idea. Oh, what about this concept? And, we could think about it this way. And so there was really generative, exciting dialogue that was happening. And we all found kind of this great common space of thinking about, why is this concept important? How are we all in conversation? And the fact that we got to rename the WAG, I think like, holy smokes, like, cause it was like, we want to be able to see this integration, and partly we picked Anishinaabe for that space because it was important, because it's situated in Treaty 1 territory. And I think that, and for Treaty 1, it's the Anishinaabe folks that are the signatories of that. So it's like, it's really important to kind of think about why, and how much fun it actually was, even as, there were lots of note taking and lots of struggles, which I'll personally say, I was like, can you put that word in the chat so I can write that down? Because everything started to sound the same, and then all the speakers would know what it was that they were saying. And I think that, I think it was such an honor and an incredible opportunity after all of this buildup of working around decolonizing that institution, and then getting that as a ask for us. Like, we didn't say, oh, it has to be this way, it has to be that way. It was the WAG coming to us saying, we are looking for a name. What do you guys think we should do? And, we were like, well, I think that if you want us to do that, this is a gift that we'll give you with those language keepers, but it's not a negotiation, right? So it's in fact, if you want this gift, we'll give you the gift. But if you want to just name it, then you need to just name it.
And you need to own that.
Yeah,
This is what we said to the director and CEO, and to his ongoing credit. He took what we said as the way forward. We said you can pick a word and like call it that. But if we go to a council of elders and language keepers and they give us a word, that's the word. You don't take it to the board. Right? That's it. That's the title. Yeah. And I think to the WAG's ongoing credit, they really enthusiastically embrace that, and they have from their fundraisers all the way through the many times we've been in contact with the fundraising organization, because it is a major building. You're trying to raise millions of dollars. This is happening, I'm sure, with the Confederation Center, with the new AGNS. Yeah. And so how do you balance the need to respect and acknowledge that someone has given you a gift of $1 million or $10 million? Yeah. And how do you balance that with needing to respect like who the collections are for and what's the culture and trust that we're talking about? And so we said, you can have Kijik sponsored by, I don't know, like whatever corporation or whatever person. But when people are talking about the institution, we don't say, Igloliorte Gallery, we say Kijik. Like you don't say, Igloliorte is probably not a good example because there's no billionaires in my family. If you can imagine, that, it's like, Jones or whatever. Yeah. But one of the things that we underscored is that, it is important to acknowledge donors. They do make a critical difference. It is through that funding that we often cannot get through government sources. You know, when somebody wants to return that wealth to an institution and celebrate Indigenous culture, we're going to take that money. But the critical part, they're saying we can do that, but the WAG needs to have everyone on board with the name that we use when we say, hey, we're doing a install in Gallery 4, is that we say Hilak, or we say Ilavud, or like, and then are those terms that become the way that we talk about things, because it is through that sort of everyday engagement that we really see a shift begin in the way people think about and respect and understand Indigenous cultures.
And it becomes part of their embodied practice.
Yeah.
Like as a person who's a non-speaker, it's like forcing me to be able to do that. And I feel proud of that. And it makes me feel good to learn it and push myself to do that. But as regular folks that are in Manitoba, I mean, those are going to be names that they're going to be using over and over again. And again, it's kind of this, it becomes part of your learning as a person to go, oh, this is normal. You know, this is where we are situated. I'm actually speaking this language because it's important, because this is where the Winnipeg Art Gallery sits. And I think that, you know, in the next couple of years, just as we've seen shifts of more and more people understanding residential school and what actually happened, you know, I think about the courses I taught in 2006, you know, the difference of 3 people in the class versus 40 people in the class. And now it's the reverse of that. So my hope is that, and I know Heather shares this, it's that, you know, that it becomes part of the normal practice of people coming in and out of that space, whether they are from Winnipeg or not, you know, whether they're visiting, they understand, they're like, oh, that's where we are. And so it grounds itself in its territorial knowledge, and it just becomes a part of our day-to-day actions that we become unconscious of. You know, the same way that the settler, the colonial has unconsciously, you know, told us to do many things, you know.
If we talk about the museums as monuments, you know, and monuments to what, then it's like, what's in your collection, and whose culture are you holding in trust?
Yeah.
And, you know, what does the monument need to be to? And I think that, you know, it's just the way forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think we should talk a little bit about some of the other.
How are we doing on time, Carla? Do you want us to pace us? Because we can just keep going and keep going.
I know.
As you can tell, like,
Yeah. Take a few more minutes for sure. I'm like, you notice I've like unmuted the microphone.
Well, we listed 6 things we were going to talk about. So far, we talked about one of them. So
it's a really important, and I think, you know, there are a lot of us folks we're working within the field that are aware, but not necessarily. So I think, thank you so much for sharing, and also being aware of the website in terms of the naming of all these different spaces, I think is huge. And also for folks who are directors and curators, and I know several of you are that in our audience, to kind of think about that model, which is fantastic. So did you want to spend a little bit more time chatting about some of the other projects you're working on right now?
I think we could do
talk about like mentorship and a couple
yeah,
of
we
other
could do
things.
we could do something quick.
I'm going to skip over Inuwa fairly quickly. Inuwa is an acronym in Inuktitut, and as we've been saying, I'm a learner of Inuktitut. It's my culture and language, but my father's a residential school survivor. He didn't pass on that language to us as children, so I'm learning as an adult, and it's hard. And so, you know, like, it's just hard. But it is an acronym. Inuwa is a word that means refers to like spirit or life force. It's kind of like, well, I mean, it means different things, but it is a term that makes sense all around the sort of circumpolar world for the Inuit circumpolar world. And then it's also an acronym that in English translates to Inuit moving forward together. And what's really critical about this exhibition is that there are 4 curators, and we're from each of the 4 regions. Nothing like that has ever been done before. Yeah. And so we're really representative in that way. We are also representative of, we've also included in the exhibition all generations, from elders and senior artists all the way down to emerging artists who are in their very first show. We've got over 100 works in the show that includes many significant works from the collections, not just the WAG's collection, which is the largest in the world, but also the GN's collection, the Government of Nunavut's collection, which is on long-term loan in order to be cataloged, documented, conserved, and then sent back to Nunavut on I think it's a 10-year timeline, but it might be shorter than that. I don't know. And then also, we're also representative in all kinds of other ways with media. We've got, you know, everything from sculptures and prints and drawings that everybody knows and loves about Inuit art, but also like installation work and sound art and like digital photogrammetry and like all kinds of things, like lots of wearable art, lots of wearable art in the show actually, which is really exciting. I think I'm safe in saying it's the queerest Inuit exhibition that's ever been. We very deliberately sought out openly LGBTQ Inuit and Inuvialuit from all around the Arctic because as you well imagine, when you grow up in a very small town and very remote community, there's still a lot of challenges around being queer in the Arctic today. And so we really wanted to support and showcase and feature those artists. We also we worked really hard on gender balance. One of the members of our curatorial team is a non-binary person. We have lots of women in the show, lots of youth in the show. So like, and then really just thinking about all the different ways that we could be representative in a way that the field of Inuit art itself has not always been, has mostly not been really. And so trying to, with this new building and this kind of new opportunity to really try to push forward a field and into a frame where it is embraced by other Canadian, Indigenous, global art histories in a way that I think is overdue and really exciting for us to be working through. So Inua opens whenever the building opens, which is going to be sometime early in 2021. It is opening, and we're really excited for. We'll be doing a lot. I'm going to be doing a lot of this kind of thing with the other members of the curatorial team, Asiniak Kablusiak and Krista Uliuk-Zawadsky. And so the four of us have been working really closely. I will just say this just to sort of lead into the other things that we're trying to make it the most Inuit exhibition in a lot of different ways. There have, of course, been a lot of fantastic exhibitions curated by Inuit curatorial teams. A lot of artists have like moved into curatorial practice as experiments, but not, I'm sort of the careerist the most right now. Maybe Jocelyn Paranen more than me because she is now full-time at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. But we have Jocelyn is actually our Inuit, she's our project manager for the exhibition. We have the first Inuit exhibition designer, Nicole Luke. We're working with an Inuk graphic designer, Thomas E. Mangiuk. We are working with an Inuit early childhood educator for our programs, Kayla Bruce. Aiden, I have to introduce you to Kayla. We're working with, you know what I mean? So like we're trying to keep finding ways to include more and more Inuit in this exhibition because very often it's like the South has been looking at the North, and we really want it to be like, no, the North is sharing with the North and with others who are here to enjoy this. And so to really flip that perspective dramatically is a big thing. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is the development of an audio guide for the exhibition. Of course, it's going to be, we think a lot of our engagements are going to be online just because of COVID. And so we have my partnership grant, Inuit Futures and Arts Leadership, with Carla is on and Julie's on, and a bunch of really amazing people are on. We are developing with all of the Inuit and Inuvialuit students that we're working with right now. It's a cohort of about 20 students across the country and post-secondary students. And so they are all participating in the development of this audio guide by looking at the works and then having personal responses that you'll be able to engage with in the space or through our website. And so that's really critical because that is one of the elements of mentoring that's been really important to us. And so that is my segue into mentoring.
I know. I was like, hey, should I talk about? Anyways, I was going to talk a little bit about Nui. It's harder because it's like still so fresh, and I'm still like processing all the bits and pieces of it. But I'd say that you know, the Nui launch this year showcased the most Indigenous, and well, it was actually the entire event was BIPOC. It's like, so let's be real clear. And so I think that, you know, it's important to kind of think that through. And one of the things I want to say to flip back to some of the success with the Winnipeg Art Gallery has been for people to relinquish their control. And so, you know, and I think especially because you're saying, you know, we have directors and such on the call, and hopefully other folks that will listen later, you know, it's like to relinquish control and to be able to give up that it's so important to know that, you know, you can't make real change if you think that you're always in control and you're at the helm and you're just doing what you want to be doing. And I think that, you know, you know, Stephen jokes about how, you know, we came in and we're like, well, we're going to rule. But it was like, you know, I think
it was you, not us. Like,
I'm just roping her in.
Anyway, go on.
Yeah,
But anyway, I think it's important to kind of think about that. And it's the same thing for Nuit Blanche. It's like, like, I got the question of, oh, how many artists fit into X category and this category? And I was like, everybody.
Yeah. We don't need to meet quotas. We exceed them.
Yeah.
There is no quota.
And I would say that even with the partnership grant, which is also linked to Nuit Blanche, which is the space between us, you know, it's the same thing. Like, I had a response of saying, oh, you should say this is equity and diversity. And I was like, if anybody doesn't read this incredible grant that is all BIPOC focused with Indigenous leadership, Indigenous design, and Indigenous driven, they should not be reviewing the grant. And so I think in my mind, it's like, we need to be in leadership roles. We need to be sitting at the table. We need to be saying the important roles of work that people are doing. I think it's important to see what Heather's saying in terms of the, you know, you need to be arm's length sometimes, and you need to be able to hear that. And other galleries and museums and directors also need to collaborate and think about, you know, it's not about checking the box and saying you have the circle and all those bits and pieces. It's actually about strategic engagement and relinquishing that control and wanting to work with that group of people and being able to be okay with what the end results might be. And sometimes it might be negative, you know, and it might take time, or the things that you did last year, you have to redo them. And I think with, you know, with Nuit Blanche, you know, we're looking at a circumpolar Pacific connections with North America. And so, you know, I think that when we're thinking those through, it's like, how do we have those shared colonial histories? What makes us distinctively different? You know, how can we find places to work together in terms of methodology and ontology? You know, it's like, you know, Maori ways of knowing is very different than Métis ways of knowing. Partly because it comes out of generosity, and I think that when I think about those connections, you know, we share this colonial history, but they actually have a bicultural country. We don't, well, we have a bicultural country, except for it's with the two colonial states, you know, French and English. And I think that, you know, they're poised in such an incredible position that we can learn and work together from that, and understand that we have, you know, distinctive differences, but also, you know, we have a shared colonial history. And I think that as we kind of continue to mentor and work with different people globally, it'll be so critically important, because we're basically setting it up so that BIPOC people can be leaders and are leaders right now. And I think that those kind of mentorship roles are so important. And I think that, you know, especially with Inuit Futures, because its entire focus is to basically mentor and create more Inuit cultural workers in any realm that they desire, you know, or are interested in. And I think that with the space between us, you know, we're really looking at BIPOC focus, but we're also looking at international relationships. So we're looking at Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, Norway, Finland, Greenland, Alaska, and Canada more broadly, right? And the US, we got, I think, Igatha and Los Angeles. So it's like a huge kind of broad scope, but think about the incredible opportunities for graduate and undergraduate students to be able to commingle and create those collaborations and their own cohorts, right? So that they get to network and create those long-term relationships just as the three of us have. And I think that it's so critically important to make sure that we make space and give room and let people's voices be heard, because they're our future. And I think that, you know, that really goes to even the stuff that we do with Glam, which can be the next part of that we talk about, is that, you know, for us, it's super important to think about, you know, how do we make space for people? How do we make sure that they have the support and mentorship that they need? You know, what does that look like? And a lot of the incubators, you know, we've been interested in working with intergenerational artists. And I think that that's really important to kind of set up. And sometimes our students, especially for Indigenous students, you know, they come to school later, or, you know, they decide that, you know, they've had this whole other life and then they're ready for something, or they're brand new, you know, they're 16, 17, 18, coming out of those little, you know, school spots. And so it's like, you know, there's such awesome opportunity, and we think about the kind of local context. And I think that that's why even this panel is so great, to listen to Aiden, your work and the things that you're doing. It like sets us and it grounds us in where you guys are all coming from. And I think it's so important, especially, you know, for me, because I only have a limited contact with the East Coast, right? So it's just so incredible to see that work. And then how does it parallel? How are we having those conversations here in Winnipeg and more broadly globally, right? And I think that, you know, we're poised to really have some excellent results from that. You want to add some glammy stuff?
Yeah. So we'll conclude it by talking a little bit about Glam and collaboration. So just to clarify, my partnership grant, which started in 2018, and Julie's, which will start in 2021, but is already started, but will
Yeah, in
really
the development. Yeah.
pick
I
up.
put the links in so everyone, if they're interested, can go to those.
Yeah, we had them. We were going to screen share them, but it's kind of like boring to kind of scroll through.
It's nice to.
And I also added the link to Aiden's project as well. So those are there for folks to check out.
Yeah.
I'll put Glam in too now. You keep going, sorry.
Please check them out because they are, we've got 2 Indigenous-led major projects. This is the highest amount of funding that the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council provides. Shout out to Shirk for doing that. And they are, because we are seeing a growing number of Indigenous academics and others, but we are very conscious of always wanting to make sure that we are bringing people along with us. Right now, I'm still the only Inuk in the country with a PhD in art history, but there are 2 PhD students right now who I'm super excited to bring out. I don't want to be the only one. I want there to be lots of people. I don't want to work in an echo chamber. I want to be in conversation with people who are stimulated by the same kinds of things that I am. And that's why I think it's so important that both of our projects have so much Indigenous-led knowledge, and then also work with BIPOC and settler allies in a way that can be really generative. So myself and Dr. Nagam and Dr. Taunton are all Glam Collective, and you can go to our website, which is very much under production. I am way behind on submitting my own content, for example, and and we all are. Julie's got some stuff up. That's about it. But check back in the new year. But we are Glam Collective it's the formalization of our working relationship and friendship over many years. Carla and I met on the first day of our MA program back in 2005. Julie and I met at a conference 4 or 5 years after that. Met at a bar at a conference 4 or 5 years after that, and we have all been friends and colleagues and working together ever since, because our works are so reciprocal to each other. But then a couple of years ago, we formed the Glam Collective, which Glam, of course, stands for Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. We didn't make up that acronym. That's one that's in popular use more in Europe than it is in North America. Yeah. But it's fun because we also like to be glamorous and wear big earrings and so on. And so we started the collective so that we could formalize our curatorial practice together, and our work in what we've been calling sort of Indigenous art incubators, which is something that we have been developing for quite some time and have formalized recently. So in the last couple of years, we've held 6 incubators. Yeah, do you want to talk about what the incubator format is? And it does circle in and talks about our ideas about mentorship, intergenerational knowledge sharing, bringing different kinds of media into conversation, and bringing artists and scholars from different parts of the country into conversation, which we will be expanding to the world. Yeah, and we're going to get to do our first international one for next year. Fingers crossed with all the whenever we're allowed to. That's when the next international or the first international one will be. So I think that it's a great format because we bring anywhere between 6 to 9 artists. We think about, they're emerging, mid-career, established. We make sure that people come at it from different mediums, so maybe it's an animator, maybe it's a printmaker, maybe it's a painter, a person who does beading or tufting, maybe it's a sculptor. And so then we put all of these people together for, 7 to 10 days. And provide them an incredible opportunity like at NASCAD or at Concordia. They get full access to the digital media lab and a kind of like working space. And, we don't force anybody to collaborate. We definitely want people to learn and mentor and work with each other. And sometimes that turns into collaborative work that people end up making, like Darcy, Tom, or we look at Darcy, who's in your show, Aiden. Came out and collaborated with another Nubialawit storyteller, Tom McLeod, and they made a work that was an animation of a story done through Darcy's charcoal drawing. She learned stop motion animation that week and made a work over the course of the week. Megan Kayak Monteith, who's also a NASCAD graduate who learned how to animate her paintings and did a stop motion animation of the painting. Yeah. Jerry Evans, we did an amazing, and Carla, obviously you don't need to just moderate this part. You're a part of Glam Collective now. So jump in if you want to. Put your volume on. but we're a three-way equal partnership here. But to switch off your moderator hat and put on your pink ball cap. But we worked with Jerry Evans, who I think has a standing invitation to take part in all incubators forever.
Forever.
Jerry, as you probably all know, is an incredible printmaker, and he worked with technicians and got mentorship from other artists participating in the incubator at NASCAT that then went to Art in the Open. I think I saw Pan went in the participants list. Art in the Open and PEI, and Jerry animated his animated caribou to return them to PEI. And so, like, being from the Halapu First Nation, which of course means caribou, and Inuktitut would be tuktu, and brought the herd back by projecting them at night in the trees. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever had the privilege to experience. And he learned to do it and made it work in a week. We might extend the incubators to like 10 days. It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Like learning a new skill and then making work with it over a 7-day period.
Yeah. And the other thing is Jerry also, he got his work. We had his work for an augmented reality work. And he was like, I just did, for Nuit Blanche. And I just did his interview with the podcast that comes out in a couple days actually. And he was like, I was mind boggled. Like, it's like, and he's just like, I never would have imagined after like a 30-40 year career in printmaking that these were the kind of technological things that I could push to take my work to new places. And I think like, same with the, Carrie's
Carrie Allison's amazing beadwork piece where she animated her own beading practice over a projector. You say she's on the call. Hi, Carrie. Did this really beautiful video about the land and land-based knowledge, but like taking that technological practice and bringing it into what we might call a sort of quote unquote traditional art form.
And just taking old media and new media and having a mashup. And I was like, when we did the MIT and we just did the digital think tank for the Banff Center, and I was like, oh, I know some people are really keen that it only has to be new media, but I love the idea of that integration. And I mean, I do it in my own work. So that's obviously I've got a bias, but I feel like it's just so important to kind of push those boundaries, because then it also ruptures people's ideas of past or traditional based work, or in other places they call it customary, but it's like, it actually was innovative. It always was new media in that moment of time. And if we look at that trajectory or that string of thread that balances us, we go, oh, actually this was innovative. People were doing this with porcupine quills. And
it goes back to Jordan's work, like the innovation of using bright colors and saying like, can we get commercial dyes? We want them right away. Like that sort of bringing it into the practice.
Yesterday on our panel with Peter Moore and Ursula Johnson and Deanna Bowen, a lot of the things we've been talking about today reflect some of those stories and perspectives. But Peter Moore said something really, I think, amazing. He said, okay, so people think, oh, Indigenous folks were really into like trade and trade materials. No, Indigenous folks were about, and I'm paraphrasing so we can make sure I get a direct quote from Peter, but it was saying, no, Indigenous folks were prioritizing buying artist supplies. That was a priority, was to buy.
Continues.
And the importance of the role of the artist in terms of writing histories, being researchers, educators, leaders, and the fact that new materiality was all about that adaptation innovation to figure out new ways of telling those stories and recording those histories. Anyways, I loved it because it was like, it wasn't just about trade. Like it's about figuring out new ways to explore old ideas or bringing those forward. Yeah.
Aiden, you should take your thing off and we can be like more interactive too. If that's okay.
Sure. I wasn't sure if you were still kind of doing like your portion.
Yeah, we need your East Coast accent there to get in on the prairie lilt. So
the more I hear it, the more my Newfoundland side starts to come out.
I love it when it happens.
Eyes.
There you go.
Oh man, you should have seen the guys try to copy edit Jerry's
text.
Yeah, the podcast, like, because we had to it's like all incorrect, and I'm just like, oh my god, I was just like, this is not what he said.
Oh my goodness. I don't know if we have kind of like a very strong structure of how we plan to do our more interactive talk, but I know that listening to both of you really kind of kind of makes me feel a little bit inspired to talk about the show that I'm curating that's kind of like 0% public at all. And so I'm kind of just kind of do this off the top of my head. But so basically, myself and my colleague, Michael McCormick, who identifies as settler from Chibuktuk or Halifax, Nova Scotia, we've been given a task to kind of, they call it like a rehang of an exhibition floor. So at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, we have a floor dedicated to Indigenous arts in the North Building. And currently there's an exhibition titled Shifting Ground, which is about different geographical areas from, you know, like from the East Coast to the West Coast and up north. And so it features art from all those geographical areas. And that's been up, and it's been curated by David Deviney in 2013. And so it's time for a little bit of a shift in that. So yeah, me and Michael McCormick are working on that. It's primarily artwork from the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia's permanent collection. And so basically they said, okay, create an exhibition, use the permanent collection. We were like, oh my God, where do we start? Where do we start? And so one of the things is that it was really important to us to kind of think about, you know, well, what's kind of like, what are some really major values people are having in the way that the world is turning right now? There's a lot of stuff going on. And we started it outside of quarantine, more towards the beginning, and then the world flipped, and then we were like, oh, boom. So essentially, the thing that kind of made it a little bit of a struggle is that in the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia's permanent collection, most of the Indigenous artworks, aside from a couple, are about 20 years old at their newest. So we don't have a lot of new work when it comes to Indigenous artists. So then we said, so how are we going to do this? So we looked at the work and we were like, trying to think about how to pull together different themes. And so we said, I think that's what we're going to do, is we're going to pull together different themes, and you'll see how this makes sense. So the title of the show is in Mi'kmaq, and another interesting thing about the exhibition is that it's going to be translated into 3 languages, Mi'kmaq, French, and English. And we're hoping to also have some audio components to that as well. But for now, we work with the budget as we have it. And so let me see. So the exhibition's title is Dana Sigadago Sipul dash Confluence. And so basically what that means is like different rivers coming together into a bigger pool of water. And so we wanted to string together a narrative based on sub-themes that include artwork coming together in smaller conversations as you walk through the show, whether that's awareness, reflection, sustainability and treaty, memory and remembering, sharing, and knowledge and gathering. I think there might be another one, again, off the top of my head. But yeah, so it's throughout the whole exhibition, you know, the Indigenous artists from across the continent, different mediums, mostly 2D works, but we have some sculptural work in there as well. And then the interesting thing about this show too is it's not just like a room with art in it, but there's actually two side components to the exhibition as well. One being called Teachings, and T is in brackets, and it's a more intimate. I know, I was pretty happy for a while when I created that pun.
I'm just mad that I didn't think of that first. Teachings.
I'll get it up on vinyl first. But anyways,
we had a conference called Teachings, Heather.
I love it.
So what Teachings is it's an intimate, Indigenous centered, intimate programming space. So it's not meant to have like a whack ton of people, but there may be some opportunities for like, you know, like elders to stream, you know what I mean? Like have different conversations, do hands-on workshops, and have some tea, of course. But that idea that, you know, like when we're sitting around and we're sharing and we're hanging out, it's kind of weird if there's not a pot of tea.
Well, tea's my jam, so you're like talking my language. I was
tea.
just like, this is cold tea, and we had a hot tea, and I was like, we got lots of tea going on.
Right?
Night tea.
Oh, and
Eden,
and
I
so
was gonna
that.
say-
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say it would be great too to connect with some of the other folks that have done some of that. Like, I don't know, like for Juana Nanabush at AGO and Jamie Isaac at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. it'd be great even to just talk about some of the work that they've done with their collection, just as you guys are doing as a kind of a rehang as well, because they've broken some of that ground. And I think it would be great to kind of cross that dialogue to see, like, especially for us at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, we had the same thing. We didn't have a lot that was new, and so Jamie's been working really hard at more acquisitions and doing that kind of work. But people get exhausted of seeing the same thing over and over again if that's all the collection has to offer.
I mean, that's what my show Ilipunga with
Yeah.
the permanent collection at the Musée National des Beaux-Arts Quebec was about, like dealing with how do you take an existing collection which has been on display for a long time and frame it in a way that is new and give something new to visitors so they're not engaging with it the same way, even though it could be similar material.
Yeah,
Absolutely too.
And-
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm just wondering if you've had the opportunity to talk to Jim Logan, because Jim was instrumental, as you know, Aiden. A lot of the work that was brought in more recently in the early 2000s was, during Jim Logan's tenure at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia under the Indigenous Curator in Residence program. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to stay. I think Jim had a wonderful time here in Kitchener-Cook in Halifax, but then went on to the Canada Council. So it's also thinking about those legacies of there was these moments of presence in the Atlantic, which for me, when I moved here, I wasn't aware of. And all of a sudden I was kind of following these little threads and realizing the impacts that lots of different folks have had institutionally here. And that was the same at NASCAD. All of a sudden realizing the unbelievable legacies of alumni that have come through. Aiden, you are one. Heather, you are one. Carrie, you are one from NASCAD, but also historically. And I think sometimes institutionally, we don't make those things visible. And I think it's really important to remember the folks that we're standing, the shoulders that we're standing on, but also the contemporaries things are happening locally and nationally. Anyways, go back to telling us what you're up to, because I'm so excited to see this rehang. I'm so excited to hear this.
Well, quickly before I jump back on that, I want to say that I'm definitely going to reach out to Jamie Isaac. I know her a bit.
Yeah.
Juan and Ambush I have not met yet, but
I was like, we're happy to do
No
those.
problem, no
Yeah. Don't worry.
I'm definitely going to do that. And yeah, recently too, actually, Jim Logan sent me an email, and I actually have been reading his content now. Well, I mean, I've been here since December 2017, but I'm just like, oh dear, we're only just now connecting. But anyways, yeah, so I'm definitely going to reach out a bit more.
Awesome. Jim is super lovely.
Yeah.
I heard just so many good things.
It's such a great opportunity for all of you guys that are in institutions, because you build strength in that sharing of that knowledge, but also the strength of knowing that you're not the only one. And I think I saw there was a question about the academe, but that's part of the draw, even with Glam. It's we're not alone. We get to work together. We get to make it fun. We get incredible opportunities. We get a shit ton of work done, but it's also, I think that it's the same. And I think that part of the problem with museums and galleries is they live in their silos, and there isn't a lot of cross conversation that ends up happening. And it's not just for the Indigenous or BIPOC curators. It's the way that those institutions are set up, and there's opportunities for directors to have conferences and have that kind of commingling, and there just isn't the same. And I think that's part of why we have the Indigenous Curatorial Collective. And I think that was one of the big things and missings, that they felt that people weren't able to get those opportunities, and that grew out of that. But I also think that there's a really incredible kind of momentum that's happening across the country and globally, where you're starting to see permanent positions for Indigenous curators. And I think that, collectively, you guys will be stronger as a united voice too. You're going to have different ideas and different opinions and different exhibitions that end up coming out of that. But it's just such an incredible opportunity right now to kind of build on the capacity of, why do the things over there that people have already been doing? Do you know what I mean? And then you could build off of those opportunities, knowledge of missings, or just dealing with different contemplations, right? Different collections have different histories and different knowledges and how they came about and all the bits and pieces, right?
Well, I'm definitely definitely taken notes, you know what I'm saying? So thank you. Definitely appreciate like any of that kind of, you know, input that you have. But I think very, very quickly before I wrap up this thought, maybe there's like a couple more things I'll mention about the exhibition. And so aside from the teaching space, there's another kind of like side space that refreshes. It's probably going to refresh annually, and it's called the Mi'kma'ki Artist Spotlight. And that's artist with an apostrophe at the end. And so that's one of the things that I really wanted to bring forward was what this idea of what does local mean? Because Mi'kma'ki, Mi'kmaq territory, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, parts of New Brunswick, PEI, northeastern Maine, you know what I mean? Mi'kmaq territory is huge, and that is local, you know, that is shared connection. And so that idea that basically when we were getting a little bit like, okay, so as you mentioned, Heather, you know, we're working with some work, you know, that's been around for a while. A way to keep it fresh and community engaged, I think, is always to show work by an Indigenous artist. Doesn't have to be Mi'kmaq, but an Indigenous artist who is living and making work on Mi'kmaq territory will have kind of like their work featured there, maybe annually or so. We'll see what we can get away with. But it's meant to be switched out, and then the associated programming in the space will connect directly to that as well, kind of like as an extension. And one more thing I want to mention, I'm excited now, is that idea of language too, that you were talking about, and territory, and what that kind of like respect and acknowledgement looks like, is that, and I talked about this a little bit in Worn Inward, but after considering didactic labels and how those can really enhance a work or it can really limit it. These ones are going to be not too deadly long, but just like there's going to be some reading. So it includes all of the regular things, you know, artist, mediums, title. But aside from that, it includes the artist's nation as they self-identify. It includes the community they're from, or where they identify as home, and what the territory is for that area. You know what I mean? Like, for example, Ned Bear, who is Cree and Willistok or Maliseet, you know, live in Tobic First Nation on Willistok, I believe that's how you say it, territory in New Brunswick, right? And so acknowledging that idea of place and language. And then underneath that too, there's a little step further, and there's like a little blurb written about the work, whether it's a quote directly from the artist, a fact about the region, or maybe like a little nugget about a detail in the work that's like, did you notice this? Well, did you know that this kind of
when you reach out, when you get to reach out to Jamie, ask her, because we definitely did that for Insurgents Resurgence, and we also did artist statements as the didactic, as opposed to us writing a description. So, and there's lots of really great examples, but definitely ask her about that. And the other thing I just wrote in the chat, that it's like, I love the idea of the spotlight. And one of the things I really wanted to mention today was part of the struggle with working with museums and galleries is that everything's built out for such a long period of time. And so stuff like when we do the incubators and we can like create that work and have this incredible opportunity, you know, lots of times that method doesn't lend itself well to the way that galleries and museums are structured. And so you can't, you know, they want to know exactly what the work's going to look like. They want to have the install ready, right? And so it's like, well, we don't know, it's going to be organic. And or they already have 2 years of programming. So the nice thing about your opportunity with the spotlight is that you're going to be a lot more nimble, and you're going to be able to see something or work with an artist that's there, and then they get the opportunity to showcase that work, because, you know, it's a real missed opportunity. And I will say, you know, to the credit of people like Art in the Open or Nuit Blanche or Nocturne, it's like they can be really nimble and organic and allow for creativity to really push those boundaries and get outside of that white cube. And I think that, you know, what you're going to do is going to set yourself up really well to be able to have innovative and new exciting artists and projects, and be able to showcase that in a different way, right?
Yeah, I was thinking how fun it would be to do a couple little collaborations with like current NASCAD students or other within other, whether that be like at Grenfell or at the art college or craft college in New Brunswick. You know, like just thinking about where folks are making Because then that's also a really great partnership for younger artists or someone kind of emerging at that, to be able to part of the spotlight. Yeah.
Like now more than ever, and I know that the Atlantic bubble is going through a breakup right now, and I'm sorry to hear that things are over, but it really does pull us back to like who are museums audiences and who do they serve, and like who are our institutions supposed to be for? And if not for the artists in our immediate vicinity, like there is that kind of an elitist, like we want high end, we want international, but like how do artists become international artists? They need to have support on the ground where they are. And so giving them opportunities at a major institution like yours, Aiden, I think that's really critical, that you could do that for someone and give them that platform that moves them to the next level that they need to be. We know that in the Atlantic, I'm from Nunatsiavut, of course. So like I grew up in Labrador, and then I went to high school in Corner Brook, and then I went to Nazca. So I've kind of lived all over the place, and I'm half Newfoundlander and half Inuk. And so I know what it's like in the Atlantic, and I know how difficult it can be to get outside of that circle. But I think that there's something really beautiful and valuable about having that recognition at home that makes it possible for you to not to go away, but like for people to feel like they can constantly be in a cycle of like leaving and returning and sharing their work outside and for our own peoples. Like, I think that's all really critical.
And it's, as an artist, like if I put my artist hat on, and I mean, I had my first solo show in Winnipeg last year, and I'd been practicing for 20 years. So like, and I think that is people always are just what Heather said, looking outward or want the thing that isn't already there. And we don't tend to support our local artists. And I think that one of the best things about COVID is we are now forced to do that. Same thing, pushing everybody.
And you got to get a local audience, right? Like, how am I going to get people into this institution that can only be in this, and then it's not like, well, let's do a blockbuster Picasso show this summer and draw tourism. Like, there is no tourism, there's local tourism only. And so how do you get youth into an institution? How do you get an engagement? How do you get buy-in from someone's online class? All of these things, they have to think really locally. And I think it is a, I don't say there's good things about COVID, but it is a silver lining on that.
Well, I think it's an opportunity for us to actually take kind of stock and responsibility for our practices. And I think, that idea of looking locally. Yesterday, we also chatted about the fact that the language that is represented so many times in art galleries and museums isn't reflective of the communities that in the local public. So thinking through, like, I'm from the West Coast, and why isn't there more programming in Mandarin and Cantonese or in Punjabi, for example, as well as the foreign host nations in terms of Coast Salish territories, and so thinking about the complexities around making sure there is those that kind of representation. I think that's maybe also an opportunity we can kind of think about in terms of our local constituents, and then also thinking about because this whole has been a conversation around feeling welcome. And so I think, Aiden, this project is going to be an opportunity not only for Mi'kmaq, but also for the complexities of the folks that live within these territories to want to come and learn. And I think you have been instrumental in terms of the public programming that you have been doing, specifically, Aiden, to really bridge those gaps, institutionally speaking, to create an opportunity for a lot of folks who didn't feel comfortable or welcome in the context of a large, provincial gallery space. And so I just wanted to really applaud you and recognize the work that you've been doing over the course of several years, because it's amazing. And I can't wait to see all the things you're doing in terms of this exhibition and the other stuff you're working on, because you're really bringing it. So congratulations.
I was going to put the heart in the corner, but I guess your guys' version of like the webinar doesn't let me do that. So this is me doing that. That's me doing that.
Yes. Okay. So I just want to make sure we haven't missed out on any of the questions. I just see a message from Angela, or maybe that's Saul.
About academia and collaboration, academia in terms of Indigenous languages. I don't know if that's like a little bit outside of what our
Yeah,
conversation
I
is
mean,
gonna
I
run
can
here
answer
today.
from the U of W perspective because, you know, we have one of the highest Indigenous populations in the country. You know, we have a very active Indigenous language component. We're working on all the signage in the 7 different Indigenous languages. You know, it's very prevalent in our school, and some of the things that we have an Indigenous circle as well, who, you know, has spent a lot of time kind of talking about, you know, how do we engage with elders? You know, some elders don't have SIN numbers. I mean, these are very basic things, but like, you know, they can be real barriers to like having Indigenous knowledges and languages be present within your universities and your institutions, because, you know, those kind of, you know, like ordering tobacco in advance, you know, like all these little things that start to break down, and you can see where, you know, institutions are so structured that they can't help or be in engagement in the way that we need them to be. And I think that, you know, languages specifically, you know, it's a big missing. And I think, you know, we also have a language circle that represent the different languages. And so we have language courses. And so, you know, for us, you know, it's embedded into that institution.
Right. NASCA is interesting in that, and we were talking about the Aotearoa New Zealand context. We live in a bicultural province. It's Mi'kmaq, and then, you know, if you think about it in terms of a treaty system, we actually could follow a similar model that would be more complex in terms of like not just Pakeha in the historic sense of white settler. So complicate that understanding of non-Indigenous folks that come from obviously a long trajectory of Black arrivants in the Black diaspora, as well as Acadian and Celtic and other white folks, and then obviously other lines of immigration that have come into what is now Nova Scotia. But we actually could follow that. We could follow a language where you could, maybe it's tri-language if you wanted to do that in terms of, you know, really referencing the Acadian context as well. But Mi'kmaq could be one of the founding languages here, and then you could actually create governance structures that reflect, and I would love to see this as an institutional model that reflect the peace and friendship treaties, but that also reflect the Wabanaki Confederacy that predates the peace and friendship treaties. We were moving forward last year to create, because in art history, there's a discussion of, oh, should we have a language requirement? And so we were like, oh, well, if you're gonna have a language requirement, then Mi'kmaq should definitely be one of them. But then, because why? That's simple. We can do that. And then some people said, well, lots of students aren't from, aren't from Mi'kmaq ancestry. I was like, okay, well, we'd have to figure it out. But I think we could. We just have to be able to have the funding, and maybe there would be some one-on-one courses that would be more accelerated versions. So I think institutions just have to be a bit more creative, as you were saying, Julie, and thinking through that. But I would imagine for NASCA students that are witnessing or part of this conversation, there will be that opportunity coming forward. And I know there's a couple MFA students. One MFA student right now is taking Mi'kmaq as a decolonial practice coming out of Cape Breton University, because everything's online. So there's kind of this opportunity right now because of COVID to do that.
We do a land-based class. So like our language keepers take a cohort of students out to the land, and then teach them language that way. Not in the.
We have one on the books. We just have to find the right people to be able to support it. Yeah, so that's a hope too, right? I think those are the ways forward in terms of embedding language. I had the most amazing opportunity when my piece for Ursula Johnson's catalog was translated into Mi'kmaq. The translator she read back to me in English how it was actually translated, and I looked at her and was like, wow, that is way better than what I wrote. The language actually conceptually held my conversation in a way more complicated way, and that's what I was trying to get to. But English just wasn't, the tenets of the language wasn't like, it wasn't robust enough to kind of express what I was trying to say around what Ursula was doing around really creating an Indigenous archive. And the fact that, this idea that, like, I feel like Mi'kmaq is like a vessel, to a container for these concepts, whereas English kind of describes it. Anyways, I'm maybe not explaining it well enough, but
no, you totally are.
I love the idea of taking a text by a white settler such as myself, translating it into language, but then having that piece translated back, because I actually feel like it would make me sound way smarter. So I want to keep doing that model of translation.
I was like, you sound pretty smart, my dear, but yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to know, we have some time. Folks, you've all been listening to us. Do you have any questions? I want to make sure there's space and time for you to ask our panelists that we have here today, Julie and Heather and Aiden, if you have any questions. I'm looking, I can't see any in the chat. If I missed anything, we can keep chatting, of course. That's not challenging. I like to sometimes do a pause to let people feel like they can jump in, but then that can sometimes just
it's so awkward. I was like, it's so awkward. I can't like, the format is just so tough, right? Because you're just like, it's like, do I say something to say something? I'm like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Rochelle.
I was thinking, hi, Rochelle. Can you talk about how your relationship is impactful on your practices?
Oh, relationship with each other. Well, you know, we all like dressing nice and buying bling and lots of laughs. I'd say the thing I would say, you know, I'm joking, but I'm serious. It's like you know, when we did a panel for the Canadian Art Summit 2 years ago, and it was about the politics of and the power of art. And so, you know, it was like all people in really strong directorial or influential positions. And, you know, Carrie Swanson talked about how she had worked for the OAC for multiple years and had never laughed at work. And I think that for me, I thought it was like, I just couldn't even imagine, you know, even like I just did the interview with the mayor of Toronto, and the joke is like, oh, you really got him laughing, like, because he was like so staunch and so serious. And I was like, I can't imagine going to a workplace day in and out, or working with people and just never not having fun. And I think and I think that that kind of energy, whether that be creative energy or just the excitement of like doing what you love, you know, with people that you love, I think is just so important. It's like, it's so foundational to the bits and pieces of what we do, but it's also about, you know, exchange, trust, generosity, just like feeling that mutual feeling, you know, like we literally were like, oh, we want to like go through the screen to grab Carla.
We've been texting
right?
Carla about how cute she looks today, how much we miss her.
Yeah,
the whole conversation.
So much. And I think it especially when we first started working together, it gave me a sense of confidence that I don't know if I would have found on my own. And to be able to take some risks and important risks from, you know, for me as a white settler to kind of step in and think about how can I be a co-conspirator? How can I move towards that? And how do I do that in a good way? And but also, yes, Julie, about actually enjoying the work. And I learned about Julie's work by my supervisor at the time, my PhD supervisor. We basically finished at the same time. And Dr. Linda Jessup was the external on Julie's dissertation. And she called me as soon as she left the room and was like, do you know who Julie Nagam is? And I said, well, actually, I do know of Julie, but I haven't actually met Julie yet.
I guess she picked my friend up in a bar a couple of years ago, I think.
I know that we're friends because Heather said she's amazing. And she said, well, you guys are actually looking at some really similar ideas, and yet you haven't spoken, and that's incredible. And she said, you either need to be like best friends, or you're going to be competing, you know, for everything. And that was actually the same thing that happened to Heather and I in our first MA kind of meeting. Was about, we wanted to do the same internship, and we said, well, why can't we do it together?
They were like, well, which one of you should we pick? And we were like, take us both. And it was that, I think, that ethos of like not competition but collaboration that really underscores everything we're doing, why we try to like bring other people into the circle and give them the tools and skills they need to go on and do those things. I think that you know, academia is fundamentally a colonial, competitive, like white, heteropatriarchal, cis space. And so like to contradict that, you need to also contradict it, not just in in your work, but also in all your practices. You're like, I'm not going to compete. I'm going to care. I'm going to share. I'm going to give freely of my knowledge. I'm going to let you see my grant applications. I'm going to read your work for you. I'm going to, you know what I mean? We can sound ideas off each other. We can share students. Like some of my favorite students, Carla sent them from her undergrad program to my MA program and vice versa. Like we're going to share knowledge. We're going to share syllabi. We're going to share classes. We're going to be generous in every way that we can possibly be with each other, because that also tears down and decolonizes institutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they want a first author, second author. They want you, want you to like subscribe into that kind of hierarchy. And at the same time, and they want it to be competitive. The same way when I said museums and galleries are in their silos, it's because it's like, we want to be the first. Oh, we named them the first. We deconcessioned our collection first. Oh, we did this first. And academia is no different. It does exactly the same thing. It puts certain people up on pedestals and not others. And I think that what's about, to disarm that is to actually work collaboratively and together. And I just think, we can co-write, we can do co-projects together, just how Heather and Carla said, share that generative knowledge. Because even when I said to you, Aiden, earlier, it's like you guys are collectively stronger if you communicate with each other that share similar positions, because you are creating colleagues for life. And you just have this incredible opportunity, because it's just like, where are you going to get that? Because you can have friends and you can have your family and they can all intertwine. But at the same time, it's like, I think that it's so critically important to have fun with the people that you work with, because work can be exhausting sometimes. There's so much projects and so much work to do. And especially around decolonizing, it's work that you never stop doing. It's in every shitty meeting that you do. It's everywhere. It's like
every interaction.
Yeah. And it's like, I feel like you need to think about this recommendation because of this thing, And I think that it becomes exhausting and it is hard. And I know that a lot of folks can concur with that. It's a lot of work. And so I think if you don't share that load in terms of the work, you can burn out. And I think that one of the things that, through our relationships is that, collectively we're stronger. Last year we did 3 exhibitions in 3 different cities, all in the same month. And that was possible because we trust each other. We communicate really well. We have lots of fun. And we just like make it happen. And so I think that, it's like, I don't know.
We take the leads like when we need to. We constantly change the order of our names on the website. So there's like, just all the little ways that just say, we don't have to conform to previous ways. So
no, and then it sets models, it sets precedents. It allows for folks who might have been wanting to do that type of collaborative work or to have build that confidence as well. Because there is that expectation. I remember going up for tenure and there was a conversation about, well, a lot of the stuff you've done is collaboratively and who's the first author in that? And I said, well, that's not how we work. This is the model that we're doing. And for me, that's a decolonial practice of, and it's an ethical model in terms of my methodology. And then I just wrote it in my application. This is why I do this. And this is how I do it. And if you don't appreciate it, you don't get it. If you're not going to think that I'm worthy of this recommendation, then fine, because I'm not going to stop doing it, because this is the way I know, in my mind, in my heart, in my being, this is the way I know it is the right way to be working, especially at this time. Yeah. So hopefully we've answered your question, Rochelle. Rochelle said that, Rochelle, do you want to share what you just said? or shall I read it out loud?
Not even, or is that even possible?
Read it. Okay. Rochelle said, thank you so much. These strategies are absent in institutional practices, as you say. It's a big impediment to decolonial aspirations in galleries and museums. Yeah, definitely. And I think, what Julie was saying earlier, the need for leadership at higher levels. So it's incredible that we see a kind of a critical mass or a desire to have more Indigenous folks, BIPOC folks in curatorial positions, but there is a need now, I think, for that opportunity to bring people into positions higher, in kind of higher ups in the directorships and CEOs, which you're seeing more and more of. And with that, understandings that folks who might not have been a senior curator or a director at another space, but they have that experience of leadership in other ways, to be able to bring them forward, I think is a key in terms of moving forward around decolonial practice. Yes, we have something to say, Heather?
Oh, we're gonna take a picture.
Hold on. I feel like I need my glasses on for a picture.
Just wait. I gotta hide the other bits.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, no.
Be more subtle.
Um,
Like, we need a screen grab.
Why can't I?
We like to have some evidence of all our.
Shake out your earrings, Aiden. One
Yeah.
time.
I can't hide the. You should be able to.
Do that.
In?
No.
Rename?
Hide something.
Wait, no, that's
No,
us.
no, sorry.
Sorry.
Undo.
everybody.
I don't know how I did
Click
that.
the view.
Oh, there we go. Okay, we'll just do it. Okay, with some black boxes. Rochelle, you're listed, and Angela and Solomon, you're all there. Okay, smile.
Okay.
You got it.
I'm glad this calls it. Yes, Paul, do you have a question for us?
I think that I'm super grateful for this conversation about research and decolonizing research. And I think it's really, as someone who's teaching an institution and everything you're saying is just so poignant. And I think with Carla, something that we've done, and I just want to put what we've talked about this grant, we've decided, and we have basically, I think, the best RAs that I've ever worked with my entire life. I mean, mostly they've been handpicked a lot by Carla and people that she's worked with, and it's blown my mind. But one thing that we're doing is that, our like you said, I think Heather, you said like giving people your grant so they can see it and that sort of thing. So for this grant, we're actually creating a whole literature review that's free and sort of like dynamic and interactive, and also everything that we're putting on our website is basically, recording everything. So everything that we've done and we've doing, including the grant that we wrote, is going to be on the website. So you can't be an activist unless there's sort of sharing involved, or memory activist. And I think that's a really important model, that as much as we talk about the idea of, decolonizing the museum and how do we become more inviting spaces, that, as academics, we have a role to really understand that our primary priority now is actually sharing as much as possible. And the more that we work with our RAs and students to sort of like, spread that culture of sharing, it's really, we can really move somewhere with what we're doing. So I just want to say that, like, all of this will be available, and there'll be a lot more happening with all the incredible folks that we're working with that are actually here on the chat. So I want to just put a plug up for thank you to all of our RAs that are doing this, and it will be launched soon. And yeah, so I think this is just part of that new process that I'm really grateful that Carla's teaching me about, and that we're all sort of, talking about in a really dynamic way. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
I think the students are so important. It's like how you cultivate that ends up being how they become leaders in the future. And so it's like, if they are shown how you can do things differently and you can decentralize, the kind of like authoritative or like one person's in charge, you can actually start to shift those structures. It takes time, but it's like, when you get to see some of like, I think about students even from 15 years ago, and you see them in these incredible opportunities. And I know even for Aiden, these two lovelies always talk about how incredible you are and how proud they are of you. And I think that that's just so important, because then all of a sudden I know when I want to reach out and I go, oh, I know that this person's doing really incredible work, and I would be honored to get to do that work with them too. And so it's just like you're cultivating that for the future. And I think that it's such an important job, just like, how you put that energy into your children and other people's children. It's like, it's the same concept, without being, what's the word, too parental, I guess.
Parental?
But yeah, it's
Maternal.
like maternal or whatever it is. But thinking about, that importance of growth and development, and really providing people space and opportunities. And that's what mentorship and intergenerational knowledge is supposed to be doing. We have so many incredible people, just as Carla said, that we stand on the backs of, and we have to think about, how are we providing new opportunities for the future?
Yeah, and that idea that mentorship is not just like us mentoring, that we're actually being mentored by a lot of young folks and a lot of students on a regular basis. And I know that has happened for me so many times at NASCAD. And I can think of the students that there's, kind of like this core group of folks that I've learned so much from. But then every day in my classrooms, I was learning so much from everybody. And that was one of my highlights, was when Aiden emailed me and said, do you want to do a talk together? And I thought, oh my God, yes, this is amazing. I get to have a talk with Aiden at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. Like, Aiden actually provided me with an opportunity to have and shared space with me. And that was like a highlight for me. And to think about, I have a couple of students, like Erin Sutherland joined our call yesterday, and I had the opportunity of being one of Erin's supervisors for her PhD. And Erin has now moved on and is a core member of OCC1, coming out of Alberta, and thinking about all the work that she's been up to. And, she actually asked me to write something with her recently. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Same thing. Like that idea that intergenerational mentorship continues and adapts and changes, but it makes us better. It makes us, I think I keep learning more, and I know that it makes me a stronger teacher, like educator, but also in terms of my research as well. So yeah.
Keeps me up to date on apps as well.
Yes. There's lots of
someone who
fringe
still
benefits.
like long form writes out her bibliography and citations. Like,
I totally still do that. Yeah,
someone's gotta teach us.
Yes. My mom keeps me up to date with technology. She's like a 70-year-old. I have her old iPhones. Like, she's like, oh, I'm gonna get the new one. I'll just send you. So I luckily have a 7-year-old mother who's very technologically engaged, but definitely, yes, keeps us current.
Yeah. And it's an exchange, right? An exchange. And I think that if you value what everybody brings to the table, at different ages, different stages, different experiences, it's just such an incredible opportunity to have that reciprocal exchange. It's just, it's vital.
And that, I think that attitude, that perspective, that methodology will inherently decolonize spaces.
Yeah, 100%. There, perfect.
1:59. It's been so lovely to be on this panel with you, Aiden. I love you. Like, your biggest fan. And thank you so much, Solomon and Carla, for inviting us to be a part of this. We really do miss you so much, Carla.
Yeah. Thank you.
We will. The plan is to bring you here. This is year 1 of year 4. So
yeah,
we'll be back.
We have an idea for a Glam maybe commissioning project. We'll talk.
All right.
Excellent.
Carla's
See you in the art bar sometime in the future, if all goes well.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. Is like, yeah.
I forgot we were recording this.
Yeah.
Started replaying in my head. I'm like, oh, what'd I say? I guess we'll all see later. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Aiden. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Julie. And thank you, as Saul was saying, thank you to our incredible team of RAs. And yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday afternoon.
Take care, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Car.
Well, I saw people do like a heart with